The shooting of Jacob Blake, an unarmed black man, by a white police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin, has thrown the issue of race back into the spotlight. Blake was shot 7 times in the back by police officer Rustin Shesky as he opened the door to his car. The fallout of this shooting, months after the death of George Floyd at the hands of law enforcement, has been predictable. Pent-up anger and dismay at the actions of police have led to protests, riots, and Donald Trump calling in the National Guard. The fact that a heavily armed white gunman can casually walk amongst protesters and shoot 2 of them dead before simply making his way through police lines has added to the growing hopelessness. American sports were thrown into chaos this week as NBA team the Milwaukee Bucks refused to play their next playoff game in protest at the shooting of Blake. In a statement the team issued, they said, "We are calling for justice for Jacob Blake and demand the officers be held accountable." Other sports soon followed, with 3 NBA playoff games, 2 Major League Baseball matches, 3 WNBA fixtures, and 5 Major League Soccer games being postponed. Sport has been united in the condemnation of the shooting and have come together as they did after the killing of George Floyd under the banner of Black Lives Matter. No one can deny that society and sport has a long way to go before it can eradicate racism. So it makes sense that those that are seen as role models want to use their platforms to highlight the issues of race. It also raises the question that should more sports stars and sporting authorities become more involved in protests beyond just Black Lives Matter. Only last week, the Senegalese Muslim footballer Demba Ba said that the oppression of Muslims in China should take the same level of importance as that of the Black Lives Matter movement. The BBC reported Ba as saying the Black Lives Matter movement is stronger when non-black people step up for it. When are we going to see the rest of the world stand up for Muslims? Ba is not alone in trying to highlight the actions of Chinese authorities against the Muslims in China. He joins other sportsmen who have made the same point, such as Pakistani cricketer Shahid Afridi, South African batsman Hashim Amla, Arsenal midfielder Mesut Ozil, and the All-Black Sonny Bill Williams. On the face of it, Ba has a valid point. Surely injustice of any kind is unacceptable, and if the world of sport is willing to back their black players and the Black Lives Matter movement, then surely they should do the same for Muslims and their causes worldwide. However, the reality is different. When Arsenal midfielder Mesut Ozil criticised the treatment of Muslims in China, no one in the world of football came to his support. In fact, Chinese broadcasters refused to air Arsenal matches in protest at Ozil's comment. Even when Muslim sports stars are allowed to highlight certain causes, the response from the authorities is not always positive. In 2014, England cricketer Moeen Ali wore 2 wristbands in support of the Palestinians, with the words "Save Gaza" and "Free Palestine" on them. Although the England Cricket Board had permitted Ali to wear the wristbands, the match referee David Boone banned Ali from wearing the messages. The official reason given was that the ICC equipment and clothing regulations do not permit the display of messages that relate to political, religious or racial activities or causes during an international match. Fast forward 6 years and Black Lives Matter took centre stage of international cricket's post-COVID return. So what is going on here? Why is it one rule for the Muslims and another for everyone else? Is it simply that Muslim lives do not matter, and that in the fight against injustice, some causes are more valuable than others? Looked at in a superficial way, the answer is yes, that there is a kind of unspoken xenophobia when it comes to the sporting world and society in general lending their voices to injustice against Muslims. However, if you look a little deeper, the fight against racism in American sport has not always been met with fanfare. We can look at 3 examples amongst many throughout history to highlight this. One of the most memorable shows of defiance against racism came during the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. Americans Tommy Smith and John Carlos, 2 black athletes, won gold and bronze in the 200 meters respectively. During the medal ceremony, they stepped out onto the podium, shoeless but decked out in black socks and gloves, and just before the playing of the American anthem, they raised their fists and bowed their heads to protest racial discrimination in America. All 3 medalists, including Australian silver medalist Peter Norman wore human rights badges on their. The reaction to this show of defiance was for both Smith and Carlos to be thrown out of the American team at the behest of the International Olympic Committee. A spokesman for the IOC said Smith and Carlos's actions were a deliberate and violent breach of the fundamental principles of the Olympic spirit. Smith and Carlos were ostracized, with the October 25, 1968 edition of Time magazine commenting, "Faster, higher, stronger is the motto of the Olympic Games. Angrier, nastier, uglier better described the scene in Mexico City last week." Time magazine would shamelessly decades later call the photo of the event iconic. Even Australian Peter Norman was sidelined for his support of Smith and Carlos, never being selected for the Olympics again despite having qualified 13 times over. Before kneeling for the anthem or protest in the NBA was even a thing, there was Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf played in the NBA for, amongst others, the Denver Nuggets. He converted to Islam in 1990, and by the 95-96 season he was on top of his game. It is also during this season he stopped standing for the national anthem, choosing to stay in the dressing room or just stretching to avoid drawing attention. However, when a journalist noticed what he was doing, Abdul-Rauf had no option but to admit he was refusing to stand for the anthem because it was a sign of oppression. Abdul-Rauf also said standing for the anthem would conflict with him being Muslim. He said, "You can't be for God and for oppression. It is clear in the Quran. Islam is the only way. I don't criticize those who stand, so don't criticize me for sitting." This all fell on deaf ears as Abdul-Rauf was initially suspended, but eventually came to a compromise that he could make dua during the national anthem instead. However, his protest signaled the beginning of the end of his career in the NBA. With reduced match time and opportunities close to him, he would only play 2 more years in the NBA at a much lower level, costing him millions of dollars in lost earnings, with many in the NBA left wondering what could have been. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick stopped standing for the pre-game national anthem in August 2016, choosing to sit and initially going unnoticed. However, as with Abdul-Rauf, journalists soon noticed him sitting for the anthem. Kaepernick said about the incident, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of colour. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way." Kaepernick then began kneeling for the anthem instead of standing, a gesture that would be iconic in sporting protests against racism in America and across the globe. And whilst Kaepernick was shunned by the NFL, sidelined, and his career effectively ended, others continued to kneel during the anthem to protest against police brutality against the black community. This led Donald Trump, the leader of the free world, rebutting their actions by saying, "Get those sons off the field," and insisting that the owners of NFL clubs take action against players that refuse to stand for the anthem. The facts are clear. Protest and activism in sport and society in general are only tolerated when it is politically and financially beneficial to do so. When the opinion of the masses gives no other option but to show you are on the side of the oppressed. This is why the NFL, an organization who actively worked to end Kaepernick's career, would show support for Black Lives Matter after the death of George Floyd. It is why, despite the financial losses incurred due to suspended matches, organizations like the NBA, who previously showed no support to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, will now go out of their way to support causes. As Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf commented in 2017, 20 years after his initial protest, it seems like now, in many respects, protest has become fashionable. It is also why Nike, who supported Kaepernick throughout his protest, won't hesitate to use forced labor from Uyghur camps to make their products. The reason Muslim causes are not backed by sporting bodies, as Demba Ba quite rightly pointed out, is simply that it is not politically acceptable to do so, and to be honest, it never will be. So we should not hold out hope that FIFA or UEFA or the IOC will ever highlight Muslim issues. Remember their defenses that they are apolitical until it becomes politically unacceptable to be apolitical anymore. And as Muslims, we should not hope or expect anything other than this. Whilst Muslim sportsmen can do their utmost to highlight the suffering of Muslims, the real voices need to be ordinary Muslims. We should not put the burden only on those who have the platform and sit quietly and not speak out against injustice against Muslims, whether that be in Xinjiang, Kashmir, Palestine. The ones who can make a real change to end the suffering are the governments in the Muslim world, and their leaders who sit idly by saying they know nothing about the oppression in Xinjiang So at a time like this, when the world rightly condemns the shooting of Jacob Blake, we should condemn those who support this cause but never speak out or act when Muslims are being oppressed. Our rulers and our leaders have a greater responsibility than our sportsmen to highlight the suffering of Muslims, whether that be in Xinjiang or anywhere else.